One of the final things that Tom touched on was something called the golden rules, and you're going to need to get familiar with these if you are looking to kind of develop in the grey belt. The very key thing that the government have said is that a development which complies with the golden rules should be given significant weight in favour of grant of permission. Fundamentally, if you're going into grey belt development, the chances of success for you will be heightened if you can conform to these golden rules, and there's 3 of them. The first one is
last night did not disappoint, and we had Tom from ET Planning come and talk about his appeal as a case study and also a general layman summary of what the grey belt opportunity is that we have in front of us. Even though we are not planning consultants, a sort of a summary of how you could potentially benefit from grey belt, because it's been coined as one of the best opportunities from a planning perspective and a development perspective to capitalise on a government change, which has to be filtered down to the sort of lower levels of district councils and parish councils, almost like permitted development, but for the land side of things more so. But as a brief summary, grey belt is defined as land in green belt compromising previously developed land and any of the other land in either case does not strongly contribute to any purpose of AB. Purpose A is to check the unrestricted spool of large built-up areas. B is to prevent neighbouring towns merging into one another. Tom specified that's towns and cities. C is to assist in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment. D is to preserve the setting and special character of historic towns. E is to assist in urban regeneration by encouraging the recycling of derelict and other urban land. So these are all the criteria that were set out and rules that you can follow for green belt. And if you remove the 3 areas, if it falls into these 2 areas, it is classified as grey belt.
You remove C and E, basically. There is A missing from this, but it's A, B, and D are the relevant purposes that are now, effectively grey belt.
The way that it's described by Tom is you used to have to cater for 5 areas for something to factor as a green belt, which obviously means every time you add a factor, the limitations grow. Whereas if you're only trying to comply with a few requirements, it becomes significantly more straightforward.
What I found really interesting that Tom said is that they've specifically removed the word villages from, purpose B in front of you. So to prevent neighbouring towns merging into one another. Now that he specifically removed the word villages because they want to look at this on more of a macro level. So they're not looking at small villages merging into each other. They're looking at towns. And he used the example of like Reading merging with Henley. That's a much grander scale than 2 local villages merging with each other. What they want to stop is the bigger towns and cities getting closer to each other and sprawling towards each other and closing the gap so it's non-existent and merging the 2 together. That's really interesting because you'll see a lot of NIMBYism villages, for example, when you try to get new development in small villages like that, whereas previously in the green belt, there'd be a much greater resistance in terms of those villages getting bigger and sprawling out towards one another. The government aren't actually that bothered around those types of scenarios. It's really on a more macro scale, which opens up the opportunities for us as developers massively. One of the final things that Tom touched on was something called...
Sorry to interrupt. If you're new here, this video has probably been pulled from one of our live video broadcasts where we show insights into our 6, 7, and 8-figure businesses. We're live every week showing the inner workings of our business, sharing tips, templates, and strategies that you can take away and use in your own business to help you grow and be more profitable. If you've not checked it out yet, head over to the live section on our YouTube channel where you can see all of the back catalogue of videos where we cover everything that you need to be a successful entrepreneur and a property developer. Back to the video.
The golden rules, and you're going to need to get familiar with these if you are looking to kind of develop in the grey belt. And this, he sort of discussed 4 scenarios, basically going from sort of your chances of success at planning to limited chance of success. It's still green belt. It's not classified as grey belt. It's obviously still going to be your hardest scenario. But then the easiest scenario is that you can establish it as grey belt. It sort of falls into those new categories. The very key thing that the government have said is that a development which complies complies with the golden rules should be given significant weight in favor of grant of permission. Understanding what these golden rules is paramount. Fundamentally, if you're going into grey belt development, the chances of success for you will be heightened if you can conform to these golden rules. And there's 3 of them. The first one is that obviously the government want to build more housing, but they really want to build more social housing because we are in huge demand of social housing. Now, actually, I didn't realize, I'd heard that they wanted 50% affordable housing on all of these grey belt sites. And typically they do, but it's capped at 50%, and it's based on 15% above the adopted local policy. So, for example, I know some councils require a 30% affordable housing on major schemes. With the 15% on top of that, that makes 45%. From a golden rule perspective, if you're hitting 45% on-site affordable housing, then you are abiding by golden rule number 1. Now, if you're in a location whereby, I can't remember what example he gave, but there are councils out there that already have a 45% requirement for affordable housing. So if you add 15% on top of that, you're at 60%, but it's capped at 50. So although it might normally be 45, you're only actually achieving an extra 5% in the areas where it's already a really high affordable housing requirement. So it's capped at 50%, but it's actually 15% above the adopted policy. Number 2 is basically they're looking for infrastructure improvement. Now that is quite subjective to a certain degree. You're going to have to provide infrastructure within your development. That's a given. If you're delivering 100 homes, you need infrastructure, you need roads, you need more things. But what they're talking about is maybe off-site contributions as well. So if you're building 100 homes in a certain area, does it mean that you need to find a space for a play area that improve the local community? Is it that you have to redevelop the small roundabout into a larger roundabout because you've got more traffic coming in? So it's basically they are looking for extra infrastructure improvements as golden rule number 2. And then golden rule number 3, which also feeds into some of the things we've been talking about around biodiversity net gain in previous episodes. Number 3 is green spaces. Your developments will need to contain elements of green space. Most councils will have a local guidance in terms of that. If there's 100 occupants with 20 houses, 100 occupants, you need X meter squared of green space. There'll be a stipulation of some kind in the local guidance, but again, it's kind of woolly. It will overlap with the biodiversity net gain stuff because naturally you're going to be providing some sort of planting, bushes, green space for the biodiversity requirements as well. So those are 3 golden rules. Affordable housing capped at 50%, but 15 points above adopted policy. Infrastructure improvements, number 2, and then green spaces as number 3. So if you're working in the grey belt, those are the 3 golden rules that you all need to abide by to give you a best chance of success at planning.
If you got value from this video, make sure you click the subscribe button down below and ring the notification bell because we release 1 video at least every week, so you'll be the first to get notified. See you on the next one.